Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, the Corporal, bringing you part two of my book talk. So, I've been wanting to do this for a while and keep pushing it off. One, because none of you watched the first one, so it's that bad. That was a while ago. But secondly, it's because of the algorithm, you got to do one video at a time. So I don't really do a 2 videos a day, And I just realized this week I've been doing videos, so I might as well do another video for all of you and all that. And this one I just wanted to talk about my book. This more specifically the story and the setting of the book. So the reason why I do my paint jobs, for those who don't know who are new, is because I wrote the Epic of Cassius Crossroads. And you've been seeing it in what I advertise in and all that. And you can see there's a pistol right there. You can see its color scheme. And this is supposed to be the same type of weapon. I messed up on the paint job. I need to apply some copper right there. Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna apply copper right there in a little while. So, no, they're not the same pistols, so a little bit of copper right here. Yeah. But they're not the same pistol, but they are similar enough in looks. And that's why I do my paint jobs this way, because one day I plan on making live action trailers, and I want to have props that work with the whole thing and everything. So that's why I do these things. So this is the orange one. I had added weathering to it. You can see I added patina to it, to the copper and all that. I added some silver right here to make it look a little bit more used up and scratched up. I can see a little bit more right here. Yeah, make it look all old and weathered. I added black right here to make it darker, more grimy looking. Whereas the stock looks brand new. I haven't added weathering to it because I only have 2 of these stocks, and I plan on keeping one the same. So let's talk about the story and setting. And as you can see in the cover, you see that's a Mauser right there. That's a saber right there. That's something you don't know. See? But that's a gas mask, and you kind of get the idea of the uniform and all that. And that's because this book is very much it's supposed to take place in the 1920s kind of timeline. Because I wanted it to be like World War One, but at the same time, I wanted it to be Wild West. Because a big inspiration for this story could have been cyberpunk. This story could have been in outer space, kind of like Outlaw Star, like this outer space thing with some forms of mysticism, different planets, and all that. I almost went with that route, but I didn't, because even though you have all that fantasticalness to it, there are flaws with that. And example, I would build it would be easier for me to make a Lego stop motion of that series, because I build my little speeder bikes and all that. This one's kind of a knockoff of a different speeder bike. But you got stuff like this right here that I built for a Lego figure and all that. So probably could improve this now that I think about it. But yeah, that was the idea. You would have different kinds of speeder bikes instead of horses and all that. And I came to the realization of how stupid that all is. Because we look at it in Star Wars. You look at the AT-ATs. If you know what those are the 4-legged things that attack Hoth. Why do they have those? And there's an explanation within the lore that they're the AT-AT means all-terrain attack tank, I believe, and all that, because it could actually climb on mountains pretty well. It's just the effect doesn't look that well, and it's on flat land. But we don't know that through the movie. It's just something you got to read like a source book for. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good. Because some vehicles in Star Wars, like the land speeder, cannot go over water. It'll fall into the water and all that. So in a snowy environment where like all the snow could be packed up and everything, it makes perfect sense and all that. Or like in a sandy environment where it could all just sink down into the sand, it would make more sense to have like a tread vehicle, like you see in the Battle of Kashyyyk, where you have those droid tanks with the treads on them and all that. But you don't, and you have those armored vehicles as well from the clone troopers. All that makes sense. But then as I try to explain that in book format, and I realize like, okay, that's kind of difficult for me. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. Do I just say like they got onto speeder bikes and rode off into the sunset, or they said they mounted their horses and rode off into the sunset? Which one sounds more like a better like sentence? I don't have to explain things like, oh, his speeder bike was a dark green with gold tints that carried all sorts of luggage on it. Well, that's very explanatory. I have to explain a little bit, but it's like it works, right? But look how thin this book is. This is a pulp. This is not a I call it an epic, but it's like, what are epics? Just short stories, part of one big story. And I thought, I'm not writing Harry Potter here. I'm not writing a BattleTech source book. I am just writing short stories, single adventures within this world, and going and explaining everything. Kind of ruins it'll make the book like 300 pages long, which I don't mind, but at the same time I think it's kind of boring. And so I want to get straight to the point. And I do kind of mess up in this one. I do admit like one or two chapters is a bit slow in this book because I got to set up things. And then after that setup, it just gets to the real adventure, okay? Because that's what the short story pulps are supposed to be, straight to the adventure. The second book, it's more about the adventure and all that. It's more about like actually having to deal with this town's problems and everything, where people talk to each other. And you get like the slower parts where like you learn a story, you hear backstory about something, but even that has some intrigue to it. So, continuing, it's like, and a little bit of me kind of regrets it, but again, I have to get into the techno babble about things like, oh, he got into his spaceship. And it's like, well, I got to explain the spaceship. I got to describe the spaceship versus hopping on the train, which I do describe a special train in this book. And it's like, okay, yeah, I could do that. In the spaceship, yeah, but it's like, what if everybody gets their own spaceship? And it's like, do I have to do navigation? Do I have to just say, oh, they flew to their location? Or like, it's interesting because I could do it. But again, it feels like I have to be more descriptive about it because you say spaceship, what are you thinking in the line, in that idea? And it creates another problem that I have with Star Wars and a lot of fantasy series that use vehicles in that, well, why have a speeder at all when you could have a troop dropship that flies over the location? The thing with the AT-ATs and Hoth, why they made sense, is because Hoth had anti-air supremacy as well. They had anti-air defenses. So they wouldn't have, and they had shields, so it made perfect sense for them to send in AT-ATs. But also doesn't make sense of why don't you have an armored air vehicle coming, like the clone trooper gunship, come in and send in the troops or drop off tanks. No, they have the capability of doing that, dropping off the walkers closer and all that. And I assume it's like, okay, there probably is a lore reason as to why and all that, because it's not a safe place to drop them off or something. It's better to just send in the AT-ATs. But why have speeders in general? And there was something else too. It's like when Luke Skywalker went to Beggar's Canyon in the first movie to find R2-D2, he went on his what was it, T-16? His little flying plane thing that is the model is used in the movie. He's playing with it. he was supposed to go on that, but they changed it to a speeder. But it's like, why doesn't everybody else do that? Why go on speeders anyway? Where you could be like, you're safe from the sand people if you're flying around the place. It's like, what if you're going to like a location? Why not just fly there? Why get on a speeder? Is it because of landing? Is it if there's a bunch of trees that you can't land? There's a bunch of trees that you can't outmaneuver and all that. So it got me to that logic, and also it's like weapons as well. Like, I know how a Mauser works, okay? I know how this thing works in real life, the real thing. But a laser rifle, not really. And so I went with a World War I setting. So you have your Ottoman Empire, you have your Japanese, because of the Japo-Russo War. You have your Russians, you have your this and that. Now, the only map you get in this is my crudely drawn map of the country that they live in. Yeah, there's actually a little reason why it's crudely drawn too. So you get your America, your Germany, your Britain, and all that. It's your World War I factions. There is no Africa though. That's another thing. It's like some places I just omitted and I combined with the others, like the Ottoman Empire and India are combined. There's no Chinese. There is technically a Chinese faction, but it's like, it's smaller and is like is very inconsequential. There is no Africa though. There is like a Mexico, but it's a different Mexico, and there's Egypt as well, but it's not part of the Ottoman Empire. Things like that. And that it kind of comes off as steampunk, and I don't like steampunk. Like, you don't ever see anything being steam powered other than maybe a train or a ship. There is like a freaking magic system type of energy source in this book, so that powers some stuff up. So there we go. And and it does have that architecture, but it depends. Like the church, like you see a place called Bridge City, and it's on the map. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but Bridge City is right there. The map was supposed to be bigger. They made it too small, the publisher. Some of the illustrations kind of got ruined because of that. But you see, its architecture is different from the rest of the locations because it wasn't built by the people who live in this country. It was built by people who came to settle the country. So that's the big difference there. It's a very foreign-looking city, but it belongs to this nation. And so the first 5 books in this series are going to take place in Akumo Verde. Except for the 5th book. The 5th book, they actually leave to an island nation that is colonized by somebody else. And all that. So, a little bit of a heads up. But yeah. And then, and that's how I'm going to have it. Like, 5 books make up like one arc and all that. And so the first 5 books are essentially you get to meet the main characters and all that. You get to learn about them and everything. Because this book series is also a prequel to the original book series. It's just that I was going to make it a comic book. But when I changed it to book format, it didn't make sense. Because it was easier to have a flashback page than to have a little paragraph explaining things for me. And also that original book had an everyman character. So somebody was being introduced to the world. You don't get that really here. So there are terms and things that are used here that are not really explained because I realize everybody knows what this is. Okay? So that's one of those things too, like a phrase will be used and I have to put in the author's notes in the back, which I do have. I do have author's notes and references to talk about why something is, but I don't even talk about the races. In the next book, I'm going to put some things about the races and all that, and everything. I'm going to put information about it because I figured you know what? I might as well do that. I didn't plan to. I wanted you all to learn about it as you read it, but I'm going to do that from now on. So this book doesn't have that. Book 2 will. We also have another aspect in that. Another thing with it is that there are, you can see there's like a little radio thing on his shoulder. Yeah, some technology is like a little bit out of place, and it's not a secret. You read in the prologue, that there was a post-apocalyptic event and that happened, and people just reverted backwards technology-wise, and now they're just starting to find technology again. So they're starting to use it and figure it out. So if it was a role-playing game, which I want in the future, a skill would be a thing called Forerunner, and that's just using old technology. Just being able to use all of that stuff. And it'll be... skills are going to be interesting in the book. In that very slow progression type of thing. I mean, like really slow. Like you got to be mid-max to max out a skill. But doing certain tasks will help increase that skill and all that. Like doing certain tasks will give you like a perk to let you increase that skill. Something like that. I am writing down the rules for the role-playing game. Well, it's a video game, not a role-playing game. You know what I mean. So that's another thing. And because when I was thinking about like fantasy books, there's a lot of like ancient ruins, dungeons, and all that. And it's like, who built that stuff? Why is it there? And all that. Shouldn't it be like if you're stealing something from a guy? Shouldn't it be not an ancient ruin, but like, should it be like a brand new bank? And all that? And it's like, no, it's like an old ruin or something that that you got to steal from. And I'm like, why? And it's because they all are like, all fantasy stuff is like post-apocalyptic in its own right, too. There was ones like a race of dwarves, and they went extinct, and now you find their ruins and all that stuff. It's like, so I just went full ham with that in that, there was a post-apocalyptic events. And now people rediscovering the technology, but the technology has been reverted back to like that of the early 1900s. And so has the fashion and kind of like the way some people talk and act and everything like that. So yeah, that's really the setting. The story, and there's other things like I'm kind of working on. Like I just figured out what the currency really is. Like while I'm writing it, I figured out what I want. And I never talk about money in this. It's like I do talk about people being rich, but like, what is the currency? They're ingots. I just discovered it's like an ingot, like this size. The size of a battery. But not this shape. Kind of shaped like a Toblerone. And I figured like, what if in your wallets, the ingots actually like slide into little loops and you pull them out, and then you have the gold ones, your silver ones, your bronze ones, and all that. Well, I think bronze wouldn't even be a thing. It probably would be steel, maybe, and all that. You pay with that. I was like, okay, that's the form of currency. Well, other places, they have banknotes. Some of them have dollars. Some of them have coins and all that. But in the Kumo Verde, I was thinking they are paid in ingots. Thought that would be nice. And I was thinking maybe I give them like a little loop at the end of them. You put on a keychain as well. So I thought that would be interesting as well. Like poor people, theirs is just jingling around like keys. Whereas somebody who could afford a nice leather wallet, they have it slide in there. They open it up like a book. Just pull out like cigarette cases. That's what I'm thinking of. It's like they're like the size of a cigarette, and then like cigarettes, they pull out. There you go. Talking about it helps me out. Now, let's go to the story. The story follows a band of lawmen called the Krahi Dragoons. If you don't know what a Krahi is, it's a crow. And if you don't know what a dragoon is, it's a horse-mounted soldier, kind of like a cavalry. Well, it mainly follows this guy right here, Charles Crossroads. First book is about him. Well, just introducing him, really. But also, how there's a 5-man band, I decided, okay, every story, one of the 5-man band is the main character. So they all get their arcs. The second one of the 5-man band will be Roy here, this fox guy. And then the third will be Crentoalis, right here. This guy in the gas mask. And the fourth is in here. He makes a cameo, and he's the leader of the second book. His name is Amshel. Well, his name is Abraham Amshel, but it'll make sense when you read the book. And then you get the fifth character named Andrel, who is only mentioned, but you don't see him until the third book. So, it follows their different adventures as they work with this group of lawmen, and I got the idea from an old story I heard. It's made up. It's probably made up. The German soldiers in World War I were afraid of Texas Rangers hitting the battlefield. I thought that was so cool that the legend of the Texas Ranger was so powerful, was so well known, that even German soldiers feared them and were afraid that they would join the fight in World War I. I thought, oh, that would be cool to see that. And that's why I kind of got the idea Western meets World War I. So, because you get that with the Great Silence, because those World War I guns did exist during the Wild West, because they were invented in the Wild West. They weren't as common, though, but they did exist. So people would use Mausers, Bergman. They would have those at that time period. But Western movies made, like, the revolvers the more common thing. So you're going to see things like the Steyr Roth and everything, the Lewis gun and all that. It wouldn't... Like, you get to see a guy in a Ned Kelly armor holding a lever action, but like a heavy trooper wearing Ned Kelly's armor, wielding a Gatling gun. Imagine that stuff. And I have animal races as well, because I like animal races. It's not furry. And all that, because I just want to draw like dogmen. I just imagine like a dogman, like a werewolf kind of dude, in the trenches of the war. Like, imagine just one of the, you're like, oh no, dogman! You're trying to shoot it, it gets into the trench and just starts messing you up. Imagine how cool that would be. Like, that's what I imagine. I love stuff like that. And so that's why I back on topics. So yeah. And they go on these adventures to fight this evil organization. Okay? Along with their fellow Craigie Dragoons. You see some of them in the story. This is one of them, Bowie, and all that. And you meet the different factions. You meet the different people, like the Scarlet Knights, the Razorbacks. You meet these different group of people along the way. All these different factions, and even factions within factions. One of my factions is called the Sparenter, which is Italian for mutilate. A religious group of people who just are like organ harvesters. And you get to see you see two of them in this book. And all that. I won't tell you who they are, but when you see, you essentially see two different factions based on just these two characters. But it doesn't get into big detail until later when the third faction is revealed. Stuff like that. You hear about the Pilgrims, who are like the church. You hear about the Scarlet Knights as well, and then you hear about the monsters and all that stuff. And it's just like little pieces of it and everything. But it's like in a later book, he's like, you don't go into the forest, but the characters have to go in. Okay? And you see like the tribals. You see all of this stuff. That's what I want to give you. Like, every book gives you a little bit more of this world and all that. And in books 6 through 10, they're going around the world now. So, continuing in their fight, they have to go visit other countries. And that's where you start meeting these different groups in their factions and all that. The politicalness. And it's not even like a whole thing like, oh, I am like these two like Shakespearean things like, oh, I want to stab this guy in the back because he's like the Caesar or anything. It's not like that. It's not this big convoluted plans. It's more like I will help you because it'll help me look good against my rivals and the government and all that. But if I fail, I'll take a rock and I'm going to hit you in the head with it. It's stuff like that. It's just one little sentence, and then it gets brought back up later in a future book. Like, that's what I like doing. It's just one little sentence to mention something in the book. It's kind of taken as a joke, and then it's brought back up later. And one of the books will introduce me, the Corporal. Like, I appear in the series as well. It's just one of a bounty hunter living in. I'm like the Boba Fett of the world and all that. So, and one of the Avengers is actually a Twitter argument I made into a story because it got so crazy and all that. So yeah, you're gonna see Twitter drama like personified. And I'm actually pretty proud of it too. It's just, wow, this is gonna be good and all that. And I keep a lot of Western aspects to it, like gunfights, gun duels, and all that. Train robberies and everything like that. It's just some people dress up like a cultist. Some people dress up as a Confederate soldier. Some people dress up as like they're working for the Kaiser and all that. So that's just a story and setting. Maybe in the next book talk, I'll actually draw a character and a page that will go in here, like an informational thing and all that, because that's kind of something I want to do with the YouTube channel. If this video gets 100 views, I think I will do that. Just start drawing characters and talk about the race and all that. And please leave a comment. You can buy this book at authorhouse.com. Get the ebook if you want for the cheaper thing. I just want reviews. I want word of mouth. I want to be a writer, and I'm telling you why I want to be a writer. I just want to entertain you people. Yes, you people. I'm sorry. I just want to entertain y'all because I like telling stories. And I like referencing stories as well. And I just want you all to have fun and come into a world of horror and imagination. There's like, it gets bloody and gruesome too in this stuff, okay? There's always like a little bit of a horror thing because this world is horrifying, okay? But yeah, come into a world where there's horror, adventure, and treasure. A world filled with pirates, bandits, insane tribals, and monsters. And meet the men who fight them on a daily basis to protect their homes, their wives, and their children. And how they stand there, individualistic, against all odds. United we fall, divided we stand. The individualist versus eldritch beings. That is what I want. Because all these guys are different. They're in the same team, but they're their own dude, having their own thing, and you're going up against things that I've seen in my nightmares, and I'm bringing them to you. But yes, thank you all very much. You all have a nice day. Bye-bye.